When you go silent, the first thing she feels is shock, not anger, not confidence, not indifference, pure shock, because she didn't expect it from you. She expected you to react the way most men do, emotionally, impulsively, trying to fix things right away just to keep the connection alive. She counted on that pattern. She assumed your interest was predictable, steady, something she could always fall back on. But silence breaks that pattern instantly. It forces her to face a version of you she wasn't prepared for. A man who can control himself, a man who can sit with discomfort instead of chasing reassurance. In those first 1 or 2 days, she doesn't know what to think. Her mind is bouncing between confusion and curiosity. She wonders if you're upset, if you're losing feelings, if you're talking to someone else, if her behavior finally pushed you too far. And what really hits her is the absence of energy. Women feel shifts long before they understand them. Your silence is a shift she feels deeply because it's unexpected and it challenges the assumptions she made about your attachment. Those early days make her replay the moment where your energy changed. She'll notice that you didn't try to explain yourself. You didn't send a long message. You didn't complain. You didn't beg for clarity. You simply removed your attention, and that does something powerful. It forces her to sit with her own feelings instead of relying on yours. She has to confront the possibility that she misjudged you. And a woman never expects a man to pull back with calmness. She only expects it with frustration or anger. But when you go quiet, not emotionally messy, not dramatic, just quietly gone, it hits different. It signals self respect. It signals that you're not afraid of losing something that isn't treating you right. She starts to notice the silence in the tiny spaces of her day. She notices it when she picks up her phone, when she opens social media, when she scrolls through old conversations trying to understand where the shift began. She compares the man she thought she had control over with the man who suddenly feels out of reach. And that contrast creates pressure. It creates questions. It creates a gap her ego doesn't know how to fill because silence is not passive, it's active, it's intentional. And most importantly, it forces her to feel the weight of her own actions without you carrying the emotional responsibility for them. In these first days, she doesn't want to reach out yet because she's trying to figure out whether your silence is temporary or a sign of something deeper. But her mind is already moving. She's already noticing the difference. She's already wondering whether she underestimated the value you brought. And deep inside, she begins to feel something she didn't expect, the fear of losing the emotional access she once took for granted. That fear is subtle at first, but it grows with every hour of your calm absence because silence makes a man unpredictable, and unpredictability makes a woman rethink everything. And this is always the starting point. The moment she realizes your presence was a privilege, not a guarantee. When you stay silent long enough, something shifts in her mind around day 3 or 4. The shock she felt in the beginning slowly turns into analysis. This is when she starts replaying everything you ever said, every moment, every tone, every reaction, not because she suddenly became nostalgic, but because your silence has created a space where she finally has to sit with her own thoughts. Instead of being cushioned by your attention, she begins scanning the past like she's looking for clues. The way you responded the last time you talked, the energy behind your words, the expression you had when she pushed your boundaries, the patience you showed when she tested your emotional strength. She remembers the calmness you had, the way you didn't argue, the way you didn't chase. And now, with you being silent, she starts to wonder if those calm reactions were actually warnings she ignored. Women emotional patterns faster than verbal explanations, and your silence exposes every piece of the puzzle she overlooked. As she plays back the conversations in her mind, she starts noticing things she didn't pay attention to before. She remembers when you pulled back slightly but still stayed present. She remembers when you hinted at what you needed without demanding it. She remembers the moment she chose her ego over connection, the moment she acted like losing you was impossible. Now she realizes those moments weren't casual, they were signals that you were reaching a point where you were done explaining yourself. And when a man with self control reaches that point, he doesn't announce it, he simply withdraws. That's why she replays everything she's trying to see where she miscalculated your strength. This is also the stage where her emotions begin to quietly challenge her pride. She won't admit it out loud, But she can feel the difference between a man who pulls back out of insecurity and a man who pulls back out of confidence. Insecurity feels chaotic, confidence feels calm, and silence backed by confidence has weight. She starts recognizing how you never begged for her attention, how you never panicked when she pulled away, how you gave her space without acting needy. Now that she feels your absence, those traits stand out even more. The qualities she thought made you too calm or too relaxed suddenly look like emotional maturity. The same maturity she realizes she took for granted. She might talk to her friends during this time, but even then, she won't fully say what she's feeling. Instead, she'll ask subtle questions like, "Do you think he's mad?" Or "Do you think he'll text first?" But these questions aren't really about getting answers. They're about reassurance. She's trying to convince herself that your silence doesn't mean anything serious, even though deep down she knows it does. Because silence is the one thing she can't control. She can't manipulate it. She can't argue with it. She can't guilt trip it. And she can't ignore it. Silence forces her to confront her own behavior. And for the first time, she realizes that maybe you weren't the one who was supposed to break. And this is where the shift begins. The moment she realizes your silence is saying what your words never needed to, by day 5 or 6, something deeper starts happening inside her. The battle between her ego and her emotions. At first, she tried to brush off your silence. She told herself you were probably busy, distracted, or just taking a moment. But now, with days passing and your energy still controlled, still calm, still unavailable, she begins feeling that internal pull she was hoping to avoid. Her ego steps in first. It tries to protect her pride by creating excuses. He'll come back. He always does. Must be trying to get my attention. Her ego wants to believe she still has the same influence over you. It wants to believe your silence is temporary, that you'll eventually cave and reach out. But as each day passes and you don't chase, that confidence begins to crack. Her emotions start to rise to the surface, and they don't align with the version of the story her ego is trying to create. She starts questioning why she's even thinking about you this much. She tries to distract herself, goes through her routine, scrolls through her phone, maybe even talks to other people, but it doesn't hit the same because the emotional space you filled wasn't just entertainment or attention. It was a kind of stability and masculine presence she didn't fully appreciate until it was gone. Her emotions remind her of how your presence felt steady, patient, strong. The way you listened, the way you handled her intensity without matching it, the way you didn't try to win her, you simply allowed the connection to grow naturally. And suddenly, the man she thought she could easily replace becomes the man she can't stop thinking about. Her ego, however, refuses to surrender that quickly. It whispers things like, "Don't text him, don't give him power, don't let him think you care." That inner conflict becomes heavy, and she starts bouncing between wanting to reach out and wanting to maintain the image of being unaffected. And the truth is, this is the stage where silence works the deepest, not because it's a strategy, but because it reveals the truth she tried to ignore. She cares more than she admitted, and losing you wasn't something she planned for. Emotions don't follow pride, they follow value, and your silence is showing her exactly how much value she attached to you. She also starts questioning her assumptions about you. The idea that you'd always be available, that you'd always be the first to initiate, that you'd always forgive quickly, that you needed her more than she needed you. Your silence challenges that narrative completely. It forces her to accept that maybe she read you wrong. Maybe you were stronger than she thought. Maybe you weren't as attached as she believed. And that uncertainty shakes her ego because it means she underestimated you. In this stage, she doesn't want to reach out yet, but she starts imagining what she would say if she did. She starts rehearsing messages in her mind. She thinks about soft ways to reconnect without looking desperate. Her ego delays her actions, but it can't stop her emotions from building because when her emotions finally overpower her pride, she'll act. And that's the moment your silence was always meant to reveal the truth of who actually values the connection. By day 7 or 8, something heavier starts settling into her chest, the fear of loss, not the dramatic kind, not the breakup panic people talk about, but a quiet, creeping realization that your silence might not be temporary. Up until this point, she convinced herself you were just taking a break, cooling down, or giving her space. But now your silence feels intentional, it feels grounded, it feels like a decision, not a reaction. And that's when she starts imagining what it actually means if you're done trying, done chasing, done explaining yourself. She starts asking herself questions she never thought she'd have to confront. What if he really walked away? What if he's actually okay without me? What if he finally reached the point where he lost interest in fixing what I kept breaking? Those thoughts create a kind of pressure that her ego can't block anymore. Your silence begins to feel like distance, and distance feels like losing something she didn't realize she valued this much. She starts seeing the version of you she always underestimated, the man who doesn't cling, the man who doesn't beg, the man who removes himself when he's not being appreciated. And what bothers her most is the fact that you're not trying to show her anything, you're not playing a game, you're not posting for attention, you're not sending mixed signals, you're not trying to prove a point, you're simply silent. And that authenticity is what hits her hardest. Because silence backed by genuine self respect is something she can feel even without seeing you or talking to you. This is the stage where she begins imagining you with someone else, even if you're not. The idea alone triggers an emotional shift. She wonders who you might be talking to, who might be appreciating your presence, who might be benefiting from the emotional stability she once received effortlessly. She imagines another woman experiencing the calmness, the strength, the masculine presence she took for granted. And those thoughts aren't jealousy, they're realization that she may have pushed away the one person who cared for her without conditions, without games, without manipulation. She also begins revisiting her behavior, but this time with honesty instead of pride. She starts acknowledging the moments she acted like your attention was something guaranteed. She remembers the times she dismissed your needs, the times she tested your patience, the times she acted like your heart had nowhere else to go. Silence makes her remember the truth she tried to ignore. You were patient, but you weren't weak. You were understanding, but you weren't blind. And now that patience looks like a warning she overlooked. A warning that a man can love deeply and still walk away if he's not valued. By this point, she feels the fear of losing a man who didn't try to control her, who didn't try to change her, who only wanted a genuine connection. And that fear becomes the awakening she never saw coming. The moment she realizes that your silence isn't punishment, it's closure she created for herself. By day 9 or 10, she reaches a place where the fear has already sunk in, and now she starts searching for signs of where you stand without actually contacting you. This is when she becomes quietly observant, even if she pretends not to care. She watches your story the moment you post. Even if she doesn't like it, she checks your last scene. Even if she told herself she wouldn't, she visits your profile, scrolls through old pictures, looks for changes in your energy. She becomes curious in a way she never was when your presence was consistent, because silence makes your value more visible, your absence makes your presence feel rare, and rare things are suddenly worth paying attention to. She won't reach out yet, not because she isn't thinking about you, but because she's battling with the same pride that held her back earlier. Instead, she tries to feel your energy from a distance. She wants to know if you've moved on emotionally, even if she has no proof that you have. She checks who you've followed, what you've liked, what you've said, what you've shown. All these little behaviors aren't accidental, they're emotional reconnaissance. She's trying to gather information without losing her position, without making herself vulnerable, without admitting that your silence has gotten to her more than she ever expected. What's interesting is that during this phase, she starts noticing the contrast between your silence and how other men behave. Most guys would have already chased, apologized, or tried to open the door again. Most would have reacted emotionally or gotten impatient. But your calm distance stands out. It shows her you're not seeking validation, attention, or reassurance. You're simply living. And that difference makes her think deeper about what kind of man you really are. Silence makes her see your strength clearer than any words ever could, because silence that comes from confidence, not insecurity, shows emotional independence, a trait she didn't fully appreciate before. She may talk to her friends about you again, but this time the tone has changed. Instead of asking whether you're mad, she wonders whether you're done. She wonders if she misread your attachment level. She wonders if she overestimated her influence over your emotions. And these questions make her reflect on something she rarely considers. A man walking away not because he's weak, but because he knows his worth. She starts realizing your silence isn't you hiding, it's you choosing peace, it's you prioritizing yourself, it's you refusing to force what should flow naturally. This is also when she starts imagining reaching out, rehearsing what she might say, wondering how you'd react. But she tests the waters first. Maybe she posts something she hopes you'll see. Maybe she becomes more active online. Maybe she tries to trigger a reaction without having to message you directly. These aren't coincidences. They're indirect attempts to reconnect without confrontation. She's trying to see if you'll take the bait, if you'll break first, if you still care enough to chase again. But when you remain calm, unbothered, and silent, she feels something she hasn't felt in a long time, the realization that she no longer knows where she stands with you, and that uncertainty is what begins pushing her closer to action, because silence always forces the truth to surface sooner or later. By day 11 and beyond, something finally clicks inside her. Your silence isn't a tactic, it's not a punishment, and it's not a game. It's strength. It's about how a mature man communicates when words would only create more confusion. At this stage, she stops trying to convince herself that you're being dramatic or emotional. Instead, she starts understanding that you're simply done giving energy to something that wasn't being reciprocated, and that realization humbles her more than anything else. Because silence backed by real self respect feels different. It doesn't scream for attention, it doesn't try to provoke a reaction, and it doesn't seek revenge. It just exists calmly, powerfully, unshakably. She begins to recognize the difference between a man who withdraws to manipulate and a man who withdraws to protect his peace. The first one wants something from her. The second one doesn't need anything at all. And whether she admits it or not, she knows exactly which one you are now. Your silence shows her the emotional maturity she didn't appreciate when she had it. You didn't argue, you didn't force a conversation, you didn't try to correct her, and you didn't chase closure. You simply stepped back and let your absence speak for itself. And that makes her analyze the situation with a different level of honesty, the kind that cuts through her ego and brings her face to face with the possibility that she wasn't as secure as she thought she was. This is when she starts to feel the difference between losing attention and losing respect. Attention is cheap. Respect is rare. Anyone can give attention, but not everyone can walk away with their dignity intact, especially from someone they cared about. She sees now that your distance isn't coldness, it's clarity. You're showing her what happens when a man values himself enough to stop participating in connections that drain him. And that lesson hits her harder the longer you stay silent. If she truly cared about you, this is the moment where her pride becomes softer. She starts thinking about reaching out, not because she wants to win, but because she realizes she might actually lose something meaningful. She thinks about the conversations you had, the way you made her feel safe, the way you understood her without judgment, the way you stayed calm in moments where others would have reacted. She remembers the way you showed up without needing applause. These memories begin to have weight again, emotional weight. And that weight is what pushes her closer to breaking the silence herself. But if she doesn't reach out, that silence reveals something just as important, that she was never truly invested, or at least not enough to value what you offered. Silence exposes true intentions, not because it changes people, but because it leaves them alone with themselves. If she meant what she showed, she'll return with sincerity. If she didn't, she'll stay quiet, and that becomes your closure. At the end of the day, silence doesn't break relationships. It exposes the ones that were already broken.